Thanks for joining. Thanks for coming back on again. It's live is live, which means technical stuff is just a part of our daily routine anyways. So anyways, thanks everybody for joining. Merry Christmas ahead of time. We're closing down shop in a few days, and we thought we'd use the opportunity to go one more time live this year, and next year, as promised, we will do this more on a regular basis. So today we have a really exciting topic, right? So today we're going to talk about faces. We're going to talk about portraits and close-ups, because honestly, what it all comes down to is the emotion of the face. It all comes down to the expression that we can capture, that we can light, right? So we're going to jump into that right away. So everything we're doing it's based upon a kit we did. And it's based upon the Go. So Julie Mustafa. So there we go. See, that's a Go kit. Judith from the Lightbridge designed it. She's a cinematographer as well, and her main idea was how can you do a lightweight kit you can take with you on set. For all of you who haven't used the reflectors yet, we're going to dive into this in more detail, what's in this kit. So it includes bigger reflectors, smaller reflectors, everything you're going to need on the go, as you can imagine. Thanks, Aaron. Okay, there we go. So, from there, let's jump into the more important stuff, right? Let's talk about the thing that really matters. Faces, right? Faces are the most important thing, as mentioned around. And if we talk about faces, what's really interesting is it's about how we actually use them. 1 second, please. Janine, bitte, this is Natalia here. And everybody calm down. We're going to do this in peace. I know we had some technical difficulties, but now we're on. Okay, there we go. So when we talk about faces, right, the most important thing is how we perceive faces. Because we can talk about lighting a face, we can talk about setting up a camera, and we can talk about setting up a lighting for the face or the lens or whatever we need. But it all comes down to the audience viewing it, right? It all comes down to what we can see when we look at a face. And actually, already a long time ago, psychologists went into this and thought, how does the eye perceive things? How does the brain manage to take all this information around us and put it into something that, recalls as an image to us? And what they discovered is they used a laser and put it into the eye, tracked it back and forth, and we're then able to say, how do we see things? So look, this is kind of exciting. This is called saccades, and it's called tracing the saccades, the way we look at stuff. So if you look over here, you can see a face, right? And here you can see the laser and how the eye actually is looking at a face. And you see what the most important thing is? You see the black dots, right? Those are the eyes. That's the first thing that actually we look at. And then we look at the mouth, and then we start to look up around the face. And that's the way we know, oh, it's a face, it's not a chair, or it's not a table, right? And then when you look down here, same thing, right? We've got eyes, we've got the mouth, the saccades are doing the same thing. But you know what's really exciting about this? See how flat lit this is? There's actually just the face. You have the eyes, you've got the nose, you've got the mouth. And down here, if you look, you've got all these shadows. You've got the cheekbones, you've got the shadows in the cheekbones. So you might think with such an expressive way of lighting, you would actually be looking more at the darker and the brighter spots, but you don't. Because our mind always says, let's look at the eye. Let's see if we trust this person, right? What is the feeling of this person? If you really want to know how a person feels, we look him in the eyes. So I think this is one of the most important things we have to look at when we talk about lighting a close-up or when you're lighting a portrait, right? So here it is. It all comes down to the eyes. And if we look at the eye, what do we see? We see the retina, we see the black, we see the colors around, and we see actually what's defining the eye, right? But the beautiful thing is, I think, when we think about humans and the beautifulness of everybody being different, it has a lot to do with the colors of the eyes. And you know what we do when we light? We usually look at the face, we look at how the face looks, how the cheekbone looks, but we never look into the eye, which actually, gives away everything. So just think about it. Lighting an eye and using a beautiful softbox. Boom. See the white big thing here in the middle? It's taking away everything that has magical about the eyes. It's, it's covering stuff up. You don't know where to look. You're not looking the person in the face anymore. So when we're looking at eye light, when we're looking at lighting a close-up, we have to be very careful, because what actually happens is the eye, right? It's like a ball. So let's do this trick over here. I didn't mess it up. See the ball over here? Everything reflects in it. It's like the eye, right? Everything that we light, what we put in the way, stands, frames, flags, everything's going to be, in the eye. So we have to take a lot of care of this. And you know what? Actually, this ball is a lot like a face, right? We have a face, and everything around the room kind of reflects into the face too. So it's a different way of thinking of lighting. We always think about light going onto skin, but actually what we have to look at is how does these things that we light on the face reflect off of them. So for example, in Japan, the way they light, it has everything to do with only about reflecting things into objects. So even let's say they do, for example, a face light. They don't even take the light source and put it into the face. What they do is actually, they set up a frame, for example, above the face, and then they light into it. So what they're doing is they're using the reflection of this frame to light it into the face. So from this extreme, obviously, luckily faces aren't like that, we go to white. There we go. Take that. There we go. And here we have a white ball, right? So that's more like skin maybe, very pale. Hopefully you're not that white. And from there you see everything's about reflecting onto it. So from here, all the frames, all the hard lights start to kind of make sense. So but when you go, for example, to more darker skins, to more shinier skins, and this already we're going in deep into makeup stuff. What do you keep, what do you put makeup on? Where don't you put makeup on? So you can let it shine. All of this stuff is really important what we then can do when we're lighting skin tone. So that's really important. Cheers. When we look at that. So here's the big thing, right? So we looked at a close-up of the eye, but we also have to look at the close-up of skin. See this? The texture of skin, I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, maybe it gets a little bit creepy if you get too close to it. It looks like a different animal or stuff, but actually that's our skin, right? So what happens is when we start to light a face, and we put a frame or a reflector, anything you want to use onto that, what happens is we're lighting up the skin. So we've got, this indents in the skin, we've got the beautiful texture, we've got the hairs, and the more you wrap around the face, you're not only wrapping around the face, you're also wrapping around all of these little differences in the skin. And it starts to look less natural. That's, for example, in commercials, it's sometimes really good just to have a frame here, because you want this wrappiness, you want the face to look more, without any, let's say, what we experience, humans, what we experience in their lives. Like, I'm tired, so I've got these things under my eyes. Anyways, we've got all this different stuff that happens, and with, the right light, you can kind of light it away. But most of the time, we've got people in front of the camera, not like me, that actually are meant to be in front of the camera, and you can really start to play around with this. So those are the two major things, I think, the big takeaways that we should do here. One is take care of the eyes. Always make sure what you're setting up kind of could reflect in the eyes. And do we really want this? And the second thing is when you're thinking about skin, always think about what's the makeup doing, what's happening in the face. Do we really need something more shiny, reflect into the face? Or do we actually want to really light the face? So those are the two things and the two options that we can play around with when we're looking actually at skin and when we're looking at faces. But I can talk as much as I want over here. The most important thing is that we actually go back to the masters, that we go back to thinking about, I'm not the first person thinking about this, obviously. So let's go back and have a look what people in the past did. So one of the first things I actually want to show you are Russian icons. This is gorgeous stuff, right? So what they did actually is, they had a big, the people that gave them their jobs were obviously the church, and the main reason that they actually got, the possibility to make these beautiful icons is to show the holiness of, the saints or Maria or whatever. So what they did is they were thinking, how can we show the holiness? How can we show how beautiful it is actually, what those people were, to evoke certain feelings. So what they did is, they, if you look at this, they used gold here for the face, and they used less shiny stuff around this. So you know what this means? The face would light up more. The face would suddenly become brighter, more glowy than everything in the background. That's cool, right? Like this. So from there, if you look at this, what do we see? We see that back then they were trying to use light to explain something. And if you look at this really an example, what are they doing? They're actually trying to show the whole face, something's glowing from within, right? And if you go into art history, actually that's what they call it. They used to call it light from within. They would used to call it sending light. So the light was coming from within and going out. And I think, I was trained as a real classical gaffer, and for us it was always like contrast. How can you create contrast in a face? But if you think about this, and after seeing these icons, I was lucky enough to see them in Moscow before all this madness started, was actually that when they were doing these things, I lost my train of thought. Now, thinking about the Ukraine war, I'm sorry. What they were actually trying to do with this is they were trying to create this glowingness, this sense of sensation from looking, and light was coming from inside out. And when we kind of recreate this, doing a frontlit, and maybe doing the background more dark and more contrasty like this, it more feels like there's not a light source that's coming from a direction. It feels like the light's coming from within, which is actually cool. So let's jump. let's go all the way around and look at the Renaissance, right? 16th century, Rembrandt and all the masters, right? So what happened there was, if you think about the 16th century, if we think about what was happening at those times, they were actually inventing the perspective. They were actually at this time saying, oh my God, we actually can create paintings that have depth. So they want to do this with lighting too. And if you look at this, the light is coming from a direction and it's actually already giving shadows. So they call this an art history pointing light. The light is pointing from one direction and going another one. So the room that's already coming up is already a part of the picture. So that's something we always have to think about. Are we showing a room and a person is within it? Or we want to have the person as a center of things? So that's something we really can play around with. And it has a lot to do with how the light gives a feeling like it's coming from somewhere or it's trying to come from within the person. So I think that's just a nice theoretical approach to look at things. Okay, from there, now that we looked at faces and we looked at portraits, let's go to something over here that's called reflectors, the cinereflectors, right? I pointed it out earlier with the goal. So the whole idea with the reflectors was coming from Christian Berger, cinematographer that we worked a lot together with a long time ago, was how can we create a really natural looking light? So I was talking about skin tones, and when you try to use this wrappiness to get this kind of commercial look, the reflectors actually give you the chance to do more than that. They can give you this commercial look, but at the same time they can give you this really natural look. And more important actually almost than this creating this kind of look is how fast it goes, how intuitive it is. Because you know how this is up there, right? Trying to create stuff. It has to be fast, we have to get stuff done, everything's in the neck, and at the same time we actually have to get into this, into this mode, into this flow of creating something really beautiful. So if we have tools, just think about painting a picture. You don't think about the pencil in your hand or the paintbrush. You're looking at the picture. So the whole idea behind the Lightbridge was to create tools that actually give you the chance not to think of the tools. It becomes intuitive. We want to paint. We want to, light beautiful faces. That's what we want to do. We don't want to say, wow, look at this cool reflector. So that's the reason we always try to concentrate on the results that we want to achieve and not on the tools. And I think that's something really dear to us over here at the Lightbridge. So we'll have a look at this. And I think the best way to do it is to bring somebody in front of the camera much more talented than me to do that. Janine, if you'd be so kind to come in so we get a face, and actually let's have a look at the reflectors. That's the best way to do this. Hi Janine.
Hi, hello.
Cool. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, if you could go back, Julie. So what we did right now, just as a basic lighting, right, we just had a vortex back there and it's giving us some fill light. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring an aperture light at 60x. We're going to light down from the bottom. We're going to turn off the vortex back there so we just get some light. So all the ambient light you're getting around here right now is just basically coming from the 60x. Okay, let's dive into using some reflectors on the face. First off, we're going to start with diffusion 0. That's a real mirror replacement. So what does this mean? This means it is like a real mirror, but we added more qualities to it. Just more output, it's more lightweight, it can't shatter, and it gives us a basic idea what the reflector is actually about. So let's have a look at this. Light on the floor, we're lighting straight up, and now we're going to use the reflector in the face. Okay, so if you come close to here. Okay, there we go. So obviously, please always keep in mind this is an iPad we're doing this with, so the quality is more about what we can do. So most important thing is, look how this is reflectors just above Janine's head right now, and I'm starting to move the reflector around. You see how the shadows are moving? And this is the most single important thing that we have to talk about when we talk about reflectors, and that's where we talk about quality, and we're talking about control, and we're talking about efficiency. So if you could go back again, Julie, I want to show one thing that's really important. And last one, could you turn on the vortex a little bit? Okay, so basically, once again, we have the light down here, right? We have the reflector here. What's happening? Janine is lighting the face. So it means, obviously, the light's reflecting off the face. But if Janine looks into the reflector, it actually feels, Janine, right, like the light's behind over here somewhere, right? You see the reflector. So what does this mean? The light's over here, so we're reflecting the light. Virtually, the light is up here. So if I'm panning the reflector, see how the light's moving? And if I pan it like this, the light's moving back. So using a cinereflector is replacing you having to move your whole light, your stands, all your stuff around. All you have to do is pan your reflector to get different results. So Julie, if you could come up front again. Let's have a look at this. Once again, see, I am just panning the reflector left and right. And the vortex off, please. There you go. See how Janine's nose shadow is moving? It feels like actually a light bulb is dangling right above her head, right? And if Julie, if you could move back and to show what I'm doing. I'm just panning the reflector. So just by doing this, I am moving a light like about 4 feet, like about 2 meters, left and right. No more, 6 feet, 2 meters. Look at the shadow, it's moving, like a light dangling. So instead of moving the light, we're just panning a reflector. Honestly, this is obviously a cool effect too, right? What we can do with this. Okay, so here's something like a real mirror, just to show you again the effect. If you get kind of close again, Julie. Just to show you the effect of now taking the reflector. You see the hard cut? Typical for a reflector. But look at something else right now. I can pan this reflector, right? So I'm like a paintbrush. I am moving the reflector around. So I can decide where the light goes. But look what happens if I take the reflector off Janine's face. Boom. See how I'm bouncing back, Julie? Can you pan down and show her pants? There you go. See how the light's just bouncing off Janine's clothes into the face? Can you go up again? So it's not always about just lighting a face. With using the Cinematographers, and just think about the paintbrush I was talking about. I can put it a little bit into the face, but I can use the bounce off her clothes to create something. So all of a sudden, it's so intuitive. I just can pan this around, I'm bouncing around, I can create any light you want. And suddenly it doesn't feel that hard anymore too, right? Why? Because we're using the natural light, the way it's bouncing around in the room, to give us a little bit of fill light. This is awesome, because this means Janine can get up and can walk around. She goes out of the light or in the light, but it doesn't feel like a light source is hitting her. It feels like really natural like this. Okay, that's diffusion 0. From there, we go to diffusion number 1. Diffusion number 1, color called black, just to show you the back of this. This is like a mirror, but with a Hampshire frost on top. So, that means if I put this into Janine's face again, I can, again, bounce it around, have it in her face straight, and I'm tilting it down. But you can see, instead of the hard cut we have from a real mirror, it's already a little bit softer. So this is already giving you a little bit more diffusion, a little bit of a more softer look, but you're still in the control of the light. And you see how painterly it is. And again, because of how virtually the light is far away, remember when I said that? Like the light source was way above the reflector. Actually, if you can pan up again. It feels like the light is actually further away, but I'm actually really close with the reflector to Janine's face, right? So if you can come close again, that means you can bring in gear, if necessary, close to the talent, but it's going to feel further away. So that's just something supernatural that we can do. We always have to kind of check the exposure. There we go. I'll do it. There we go. Okay, here we go. Diffusion number 1. Okay, from here the magic actually starts. From there we go to diffusion number 2. Awesome. So diffusion number 2. I'll show you this again from here. So put it out here, it's better. Color code blue. Diffusion number 2. Okay, fits in the face. And see how all of a sudden how soft the light gets? And again, we've still got control. So look at this. This is kind of crazy, right? So we're actually creating this really, see the shadow over here? It's a really soft shadow, right? But there's no frame. Julie, can you go back and show the reflector? Look how soft this is here. But there's no frame. There's no flags. There's nothing. We're engineering everything into the surface. Everything we do actually is coming from this thin, slick Cinematographers. And there's one other thing. See how beautiful, how soft the light is in Janine's face? But if you look at the camera, if you look at the reflector, can you show it again? There's no light going in your direction. That means it's spill light free. That means, ladies and gentlemen, this is a diffused light source that is spill light free. This is a game changer in the world of lighting, because all of a sudden we can create soft light and we don't need additional gear. See how fast it gets us, see how more intuitive this gets us, see how much more time you actually have to play around with the light, what you like, more in the face, more like this, whatever you want to create. Same thing again, for example, let's say we want some light on Janine's face. And we say, okay, we got some light in the background. We don't want the light in the background. All I have to do is I have to tilt down the reflector. So all of a sudden, instead of putting up flags or stuff, our main control is just how we actually pan the reflector around. Up and down, left and right. That's all we have to do, and that's where he created. See how natural, how beautiful this looks? It has its own unique style. And see how many different moods I can create. Like let's say, okay, this is a little bit hard here with the camera. Let's see. A bounce from down below. See, the light's glowing. There's no light in her face. Oh, you want some light in the face? No worries, I just started to tilt it up. Again, fighting exposure here. Okay, but you get the idea, right? Up in the face, pan it down, boom, the light comes bouncing back again. Full control, different kinds of moods, different kinds of stories. And let's say, oh, you want some light more from the back? Well, then just take the reflector back. And there you go. Take it up, take it down, a little bit more wrapped around. Okay, I can do this all day long. Let's go to diffusion number 3. Okay, diffusion number 3, color code violet. This is a 50 by 50 centimeter reflector. Obviously, we've got different sizes. We'll have a look at this. So diffusion number 3 is already getting really soft in the face. There we go. But here we don't want the light in the face. No worries. I'm tilting it down and come back again. All the different possibilities I have by just using one paintbrush. Same time, I've got the level of diffusion. I've got full control. No flags standing around. No extra frames. A lot of space to move for you, for the director, for the talents, for everybody involved and working on set. And this same thing again. Light on the background. Oh, we don't want light on the background. Okay, take it down. But see how it's still almost the same in Janine's face? This is crazy, right? It's no flags, no frames. Just a little bit of movement of the reflector. Julie, can you go back so I just show the movement again? So here we go. In the face, out of the face, background, no background. All we're doing is we're panning around the reflector to do what's necessary to create some beautiful light. There we go, diffusion number 3. Now we're going to look at diffusion number 4. That's maximum diffusion. It's like subsurface scattering. It's made like a snow light layer. It's got 2 layers. You see there's no more aluminum in the front. It's really got a second coating on top. So if we go into this is going to be very close to what we know as our standard white. Has more output. We already lose a little bit of control, but it's very close to what we know as our standard beauty light, right? But again, see how close you can get. It still feels like it's further away. I can take it out again. I can come in again. There we go. Okay, here starts the basics. Okay, Julie, if you can go back. Let's say for a moment, you know, if we like it or not, doesn't matter for this instance. Let's say we're going to fix this now. So we're going to come close to the seal here at the back. I'll hand this over to my dear friend. There we go. Laszlo's going to mount this. See, easy and fast. There we go. Very good. I'm going to move up my nose. I had to hide him in school. I don't have to hide him here. There we go. Okay, simple and easy, right? So again, we're on a stand. We can mount this around. Obviously, Laszlo knows what it's doing, so this is fine. But let's say what we have right here now is maybe a little bit not enough push, right? Because what is quality light? Quality light always means having a source, but adding something into an additive element into this. So in this case, we're going to use a diffusion number 2 blue. See, this is a 25 by 25 centimeter reflector. And we're actually going to do now is, I'm going to take the same light, so 60x blue going into the reflector, and make sure that we have light on it. Wonderful. And I'm going to add a second source into this. And all of a sudden, we've got a hard push in a soft light. Just think about this. Just a second reflector, no second light source. And we're just adding in a little bit of a push. And suddenly we're changing the quality completely. Julie, come close maybe. It's going to be easier to look. For me to see too. Okay, there we go. So, there we go. And now look what's happening in the face. Push. And you see the beautifulness of, just look over here. Sorry, so if you look over here at the chin, see how it's bouncing back? This is just gorgeous. Look at this. I'm just putting light on her clothes, and all of a sudden her chin's glowing up. So it's this magicalness of using a controlled diffuse light source, a cinereflector, to say I want light in the face, I don't want light in the face. Let's just use the bounce off of the white to give some light back into the face. Or I can take it up. There you go, full control. This was our soft light just like this. Now we're adding a little bit of a light extra to give it an extra push. You're gonna have fun doing this on set because it's fast, simple, and easy to get it done. So let's say we like this, just so you see how the setup looks like. I'm gonna hand this over again. See, Laszlo's just mounting it to the same stand, second reflector. That's all that's necessary. Boom. There we go. And it's simple, easy. Look how slick this setup is. There's no frames, there's no flags standing around. It's done. There you go, finished, just like this. Okay, from there, we actually can go to the next step. Let's say we want to do something more in Roger Deakins style, right? We all know the famous Roger Deakins, and what he did always was, he used the light and he wrapped it around. So he used a harder light in the back and wrapped it around the soft in the front. And this is what we're going to do now. So I did miss out on something. I'm going to repeat this in a moment. So what we did here is first, go back for a moment. Here we go. This is something, a light source down below, a reflector up above. We call this, ta-da, single reflection. Okay, perfect, right? So next step, we're going to add a reflector in. We can do it last time. So what Laszlo's doing right now is, he is doing, ta-da, additional reflection. Okay, wonderful. So what we're going to do next now is, we're actually going to do the Roger Deakins style, which we said we're going to call, ta-da, staggered reflection. So let's have a look at staggered reflection. That means is, to do what Mr. Deakins does, we're going to take a soft reflector in the back, and we're going to come hard, we're going to do the harder reflector in the back, and it comes softer to the front. So if you look at what Laszlo's doing it, he's actually adding a second reflector. So just that we go step by step, I'm going to take out our additional reflection reflector. Out. There we go. And a beautiful map gives some matching on. 60x. Okay. So here we go, right? We just had our soft white light from the front. We're going to put this away for a second, so we just get a chance to have a look at the diffusion number 3. So see how easy that is actually to see. What am I doing? It's not only turning on lights on and off, which is fast these days luckily, but it's about easily panning something off and putting something else on. So first we're going to look at diffusion number 3 into the face. So this is what we get from this. Okay, you can come close again, make it better. There we go. Okay, so that's nice. Okay, thanks Janine for. She's a pro. She knows where she has to look. So there you go. Okay, perfect. So like that, and now we're going to say, okay, we're going to add a diffusion number 4 to the front to give it some fill. So see what's happening in the complexity. We're adding a hard reflector from the back, a diffusion number 3, and we're adding a softer reflector, diffusion number 4 from the front. Maybe Julie can go back to show the setup. Perfect. Simple and easy, right? So that's all we had to do. And again, we actually can take this away now, just to show you the effect. See how simple this setup is. We have a light source below. This can be any light, basically. In this case, we chose one that gives us a little bit more push. And we'll put some black wrap around so we wouldn't have anything in Janine's face. Obviously, when you're lighting a scene like this and an actor and actress is moving around, you're going to put this light somewhere where it's out of frame. You can put this any way you want. It's just simple and easy. What we always recommend is taking the light source, clamping it onto the stand. So when you're moving the stand with the reflector, it happens at once. Okay, there you go, boom in. And then we're going to the second one. So now we're going to do a trick. Now we're going to say, we're actually going to do multiple reflectors. So what do we mean by this? Multiple reflectors means we're going to add more into it. And to keep it really simple and easy, we actually want to add a kicker to the back. So we take care, we're using one light source and we're bouncing the stuff all around, right? Kick that light, all your lights gone. So I really only recommend doing this if you know it's the setup that's going to stay. This is not a tool where you think about it's fun to bounce the stuff all along here and there. We don't recommend this. Keep it as simple and easy as possible. If it gets too complicated, just add a new light source. So yes, you can save lights using the reflectors, but at the same time, always keep in mind the fast workflow. So it's always this balancing this. Okay, so enough talking. What we're going to do is we're going to add a kicker from the back. So what Laszlo's going to do is, he's going to just actually borrow some light from the reflector down there. I'm going to push it back to me. There you go. This is a 7x7, a really small reflector. He's using a diffusion 0. And he's giving me some light into diffusion number 2 and adding a kicker. See? And all of a sudden, we only have one light. Maybe you can come close. There we go. And suddenly we're adding a kicker into the light. We have one light source, we have a beautiful complex key light, and now we're adding in a nice kicker to the background. This being said, the Cinematographers and the Lightbridge really are meant to be used as a key light. They're high quality, the way it uses on the skin, you can see hopefully this on the iPad, but obviously you sometimes can use them for effects if necessary. But the whole system, the way we developed it, how it can withstand wind, how it can withstand, shooting rains and stuff, it's really meant for using it like this. Okay, simple and easy. Maybe go back one more time and show it from there. There you go. Awesome. Perfect. There you go. Perfect. Done. So, whoops. From there, we're now going to do something else. We're going to look at more classical kind of setups, right? Because sometimes it's just necessary. Talking about eyes and all this stuff, sometimes clients want the kind of standard lighting setups. And I want to show you a few ways how you can do this and still use the reflectors to an advantage, to augment, to help, to really get the scene to something look more out of the box, or however, faster workflow. Whatever it is, you have to feel comfortable on set, so we're going to show you one way to do this. So what we're going to do is, we're going to take out the reflectors, we're going to put in a frame, and we're going to first put on a light, and then we're going to start from there. So we're going to take out the reflectors. Boom. Back here we've got a Felix light. Again, if you're using it into a light directly into the face, it's really important to use a high quality light source. So here right now we're using the Felix, a Q8. We can spot it down. Let's take it out for a second. Just give me 1 chance. So, classical way to do things is you spot it, then you pan it exactly where you want to have the light. This is not the way the Japanese do it. That's the way I learned it over here. And then what you do is you set it, and then you say you flood it to the level that you want it, and then it's still going to be too hard. And then we actually have a light. So we don't like this light, right? Maybe you can go back just to show what we're doing. So we have one light, right? And it's lighting to the face. So we have to do something, right? To actually make this light more beautiful. And this thought process that we have over here is actually exactly why the Lightbridge got started. That's exactly the reason why we try to push the envelope in the Lightbridge. Because we're saying, if this isn't right, you have to add a frame, you have to add flags, you have to do all this stuff. What's the problem? We're fighting symptoms, but not the cause. That was the whole idea of the reflectors, to say, let's go back to the source, let's take away the frames, let's take away the flags, and really look at what the problem is. And even if this is a high quality light source, it's still not doing this what we need to do. And that's the reason we actually came up with the reflectors, right? And in our case, standard way of lighting, that's the way I grew up too, and that's the way actually we have to do it a lot of times too. We take a light source, we put what we need to do, it's far too hard, so we bring in a frame. That's what we're going to do. So what happens if we bring in a frame? Look at the background, right? The whole background goes up. That means if we don't want to have this background back here, we have to bring in a flat, right? We're going to take this away to do this. So all of a sudden we're adding all this gear that we didn't do ahead of time. So that's actually something that we have to take care of. In our case right now, please just ignore this. We're really just looking at the light in the face and what we actually can do with this. So it's nice and soft, it's wrappy. We can move the frame around if we actually want to get it more to the front. That's still something we can do to get a little bit more feeling how contrasted we get, just by moving the frame around a little bit to get a feeling for what we want to do. But you guys all know this. So here's the thing. So this is nice, right? But we say we want a little kicker coming in from the back. So that's actually what we're going to do now. If Julie goes back again. We got a frame, it's got nicely, it's wrapping around her face, and now we want to have a kicker. So what we're going to do is, because we got all this space over here, right? Last actually can catch some light, and you see how thin these reflectors are. So by him catching a light, he's not making a big shadow on the frame, but he's giving me a whole lot of light. So actually, can do a kicker, just like this. So actually, just what we did before, we're just using our soft key light from the front, and we're adding something to get a little something special. And Julie, if you can come up front again, show the face. I know it seems like ping pong, right? Okay, I'm adding this, it's light's going over here. That's actually what light always does. It's always bouncing over. So in our case, we're just really using the flow of light to its maximum to achieve this output. You know, these reflectors only have 3% light loss, so actually can pull this stuff off with not a lot of gear. No light, extra kicker. So I'm not seeing the result, but I'm sure you get the idea. Okay, perfect. You know, guys, and if any questions come up, please just shoot them. We're here live, so we can answer anything that we can for this instance. Okay, so this is one way to do it. Direct light through a frame. Let's look at a little bit more subtle approach. Let's look at actually doing a book light. What is a book light? A book light means you're going to bounce into something white and then you're going to go through a frame. That's going to give us a super soft, rapid light. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to use the 60X. If you can, I can see it from over here. Yes. I'm going behind the frame. And we're turning off the Q8. And now we're going to take the white. That's a matte bounce from we're bouncing it now into the light. So this is like boom, boom into here. And if you come up front again, Ms. Julie. So here's a cool question that came up. We're going to answer later. How much light loss do the reflectors have? They only have 3% light loss. Let me point this out. Not 2 stops, not 1 stop. Only small 3% of light loss. So that means hardly anything. So compared to all these setups, you're going to need less strong lights to all the stuff you want to do. And that's really the beautiful thing about it. Because you're not putting anything in the way of the light, right? We don't like the light that initially does. So we're putting a bouncing into white, going through frames. We're losing like 2, 3, 8 times as much light than we actually have to do using the reflectors, resulting in not to have to carry around these big heavy lights all the time to actually achieve what you want to do. That's the awesome thing about it too. Okay, so here we go. Bounce in, out. And the issue that we always have with doing this is it is soft, it is rappy, maybe we like the background, it does our basic job, but again, it's not adding this extra punch. It's not giving us the chance to actually be creative, see how we can help the face, create an emotion, right? Light always creates emotion, so that's what we want to do. So what we're going to do here now is, we're actually going to take a reflector, I'm going to do nothing else. I'm just saying, this is like a quarter grid here in the front, so I'm going to use the 60X, bouncing it here into the matte bounce. I'm just going to take a diffusion number 2, 25 reflector. I'm going to put it in. I'm just going to add a little bit of extra light. Just give us a little bit of pushback. If we go close, this is what we start out with. And then we're just going to add. There we go, more push. And see how all of a sudden there's more light coming to it, more life coming to it. That's the word I was looking for. Coming in here. And this is a diffusion number 2. So I'm thinking, okay, this is maybe is not enough concentrated. So let's go to diffusion number 1, 0. There we go. That's a diffusion number 0. So we're just going to add a little bit more here coming onto the shoulder. See this? Maybe this is already just giving us a nice little effect. I'm sorry guys, we're going to having big Christmas technical issues, so I'm going to have to talk into the iPad today. I hope this is okay. We're going to fix this again next year. There we go. Maybe into the face even a little bit. Depends. There we go. Perfect. Awesome. There we go. Nice little extra push. Maybe you can come back again. If you have a feeling it's not giving enough control, I was just thinking maybe if this frame would be a little bit thinner, we still have the beautiful soft light, but it could get more push through the grid, so maybe an 1/8 grid or a silk maybe would be better. So that's stuff you always can play around with. But in our case, we only have this here. So this is the basic idea. Don't worry about the shadow at the back, because the light that's pushing out of here is giving you much more output. I'm going to talk a little louder than you would actually get from the white. So you're compensating with the diffusion, with the reflector in the front. You're really compensating the light. So here we go. Perfect. Done with. And again, a simple, easy setup, but you're still catering the needs of what's necessary, you know, in the commercial world, for example, when we have to do something like that. Okay, there we go. That is actually everything that I wanted to show you right now, talking about eyes. So, Janine, thank you so much for coming in today. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thanks. So, okay, here we go. So if there's any questions that come up right now, now would actually be the time where we actually can answer them. I think it all comes down to the main approach. I'm just going to continue to talk until somebody asks a question. If not, we're just going to wrap it for the day. Our beers are cold, so they're waiting for us too. So I think the basic thing when we think about eyes, just, you know, to wrap it all up again, is faces are about eyes, it's about the mouth, and then everything else comes into play. So when we're lighting, always take care of the eyes, take care of the light wraps around it and how it comes in. And at the same time, it's always important to think about the skin tones. What's happening with the skin tones? So on bigger feature films, obviously we do makeup tests, so we test exactly that. How is the skin tone reacting to the makeup? How is it reacting to the light? So a lot of times it's better not to put on too much makeup, especially with the Cinematographers. You will find out that you don't need that much makeup, because you know what actually happens? It's actually interesting. With the soft light like we have right here, it's wrapping around. So it's taking away all the nuances, all the details in the skin. So what makeup artists mostly do is they try to bring those back. So they're adding up more makeup to compensate for that again. But initially, we've got one problem because the light's actually doing this already. So by taking this wrappiness away from it and actually trying to be more nuanced about reflecting light onto skin, you need less makeup. It's going to look much more natural, and you can actually start to use the makeup to tell a story than just to hide problems, for example. So that's something always to look into and to be careful about when lighting. When you have a makeup artist, sometimes you don't, and it's a really reflective face or somebody's sweating. That's again when you have to bring in these big lights because you want to need this wrappiness. Just like think about the crystal ball, right? It is everything reflects, so you're going to need one big light source to go in. But as soon as this is not the case, you actually can go to a more different approach, like I was telling you what I've learned in Asia. So the question comes in, how do you use lighting in dark movies? You know, if it's dark, you put up less lights. That's just the basic thing about it. But you know, we don't want to be in the radio, so we have to see things. So again, it comes back, you know how I told you about the saccades, how I told you about how the eye sees things? It's the same thing that comes when you light darkness. If you really want to create darkness, you need something bright to have it to look dark. Because if you don't put anything there, it's just going to blur up in gray, and it's not going to look really crispy and dark. So that's something to look into when you're thinking about creating darkness. So it's all about contrast, nuances, and how to put stuff in like that. And the other question that always comes up is, thanks Laszlo, is, I'll finish this one first. So when you're lighting something dark, for example, it doesn't just stay with the topic of today. When we want to try to see faces in the dark, sometimes it's really great to totally underexpose the face, but keep the highlight. Make a really strong highlight so people know where to look, because they're always looking for the eyes, right? So that's something that can help in this instance. So it's not about creating blue moonlight coming in. I think that is something that's a little bit overused. So I think it's really important to think about how to create this darkness. How do we perceive darkness, and what can we do about it? For example, think about a person lying in a bed with white sheets. The face will always look dark because the sheets are brighter. So sometimes it's great when you're creating dark scenes, take dark sheets, let the skin glow, and then it's going to be much easier with lighting. So I think the combination between makeup, hair and makeup, and art department is so vital for us in lighting, that way said. So the question came up about parallel fixtures. And you know, the reflectors have been around for some time. We started developing them with Christian about 15 years ago on set, and he had this idea some time ago too. And you know, honestly said, I'm a gaffer, right? So for me to start a company was only meant because all the manufacturing houses out there we were trying to work together with didn't create the quality that was necessary. So I felt comfortable sharing this with colleagues on set. So when we started this, the whole idea was to say, well, let's do something like the sun. Let's use something more parallel and raise and bounce into this. But I'll just be real honest with you. Anybody who says you need a parallel beam wants to sell you a parallel beam. It's a reflector. Anything that you put in comes out. And that's the basic rule of the Cinematographers. The light quality that goes in comes out. Manuel Billeter on the big HBO show Gilded Age, what is he doing? He's only using sky panels with reflectors. Because he wants the softness, he's using the ambience around, and he's putting in a diffusion 1 and diffusion 2 to get this punch back, to take this diffused light and give it back. So the reflector is always the light that goes in, the light that goes in comes out, plus the level of diffusion that you have from the reflectors. You can use sodium vapor bulbs. You can use, fluorescent tubes. So all this stuff actually works because what goes in comes out. 100% color consistency, only 3% light loss. So that's the great thing to start off from there. Circular reflection in eyes. See, that's a question that always comes up a lot. Why? Because obviously our reflectors are square. Why? Because this makes sense, just the way the beam of light is round. So when you put a reflector, and it just kind of fills it up the best. So that's the reason we did it like this. And having round reflectors is a little bit an issue because they roll on set if you just put them into a corner. So we developed all this stuff on set. So we tested this stuff and saw all the stuff that was happening. We do, if people request round reflectors, we do custom orders for round reflectors because sometimes they do make sense. Great colleagues of mine, they asked for them because they said, look, I don't want to mess around. I need a round one for close-up and done. Of course we do this, right? For all of you who don't want to do custom orders, you can take a piece of black paper, cut out a round hole, put it onto a reflector, and you're done with it. I don't want to sell you anything here, so this is also a way you can do this. There's a basic rule of lighting. Actually, this question was asked to Roger Deakins. What's the most important thing about lighting? You know what his answer was? Grow as a human being. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's about. You're trying to create something, right? So you want to create an emotion. And the most important thing you have to do is you have to feel it. Honestly, you have to stand behind the camera, look at the lighting. Does it feel right for you? And if it feels right, shoot it, go ahead, push against anything. I just couldn't support you more to go against all odds because you feel it's right. And if you don't feel it's right, you gotta change it. And I would support you as a gaffer the same way. If it doesn't feel right, you gotta change it. So I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I think it's a very complex topic we can't cover here today, but we've got all of next year. So if you've got any ideas, what do you want to bring on board, what do you want to have us talk about here, we'd be honored to answer your questions over here. But from there, that's I guess what I can give you on the way for that. I know it's not precise because it's not a rule of thumb like this when it comes to lighting. Okay, what size of reflectors would you recommend for eye light? So that's a good question. The thing is, it depends. Like I did this tour of Asia, and in Asia with a lot of the dark eyes, you really have to take care where to place eye light. And as Janine was doing automatically, she was always saying, okay, I'll look a little bit into the light, I'll catch the light. So ideally, you don't have to set up extra eye light. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it's a 7x7, a small reflector just behind the camera, because what you don't want with an eye light, you don't want the face to light up. You just want to have a sparkle in the eyes. So that's the reason a smaller size makes just more sense like that. But usually, again, if the light is set up correctly, the eye light's going to look great. So it always goes back to the basics. And that's the reason I'm a big supporter of putting up less gear, because you get more time to play around with it. That means you get more time to figure out the mistakes, not adding stuff because the light source isn't doing what it should do in the first place. So better swap it out in the beginning, set it up like that, and get it where it needs to go. But at the end of the day, sometimes it looks great, you just need a little bit extra glow in the eyes. Sometimes a piece of paper on a tape, just put it there. Sometimes it's going to need a reflector, put it there. It's as simple as that. I wouldn't honestly overthink it unless you're shooting a movie like Blade Runner, where it was always about the eye being exactly in the center. And that was a major thing they did for that. How do I control light intensities between different reflectors by distance? So here's the thing. Okay, we're going to close shop here in 5 minutes. That's a big topic. The thing is, yes, only 3% light loss. When it goes onto the reflector, yes. The further the light is away, then Ver's square law does count. So it means you're going to lose light on the distance from there. So there's two things you can do. If you don't have enough light, use a bigger reflector, because you're going to catch more surface of the reflector, or use a harder reflector because you're going to bundle the light more. And I think from there, that's a basic way to do it. The topic is really complex because it's a lot to do with the spill light around the reflector. Sometimes that's great, sometimes it isn't. We're going to definitely be covering these topics in the next chapters. Yeah, you know, honestly, I think we're going to put the next into the next session. It was a pleasure again to be back and to see all of you here through the internet. It's great, obviously, to be able to travel again too. So if you get a chance, we do master classes. You know, we're going to be back in trade shows this year, and the next one, of course, next year. Still, we're going to be there again too. So happy to meet all of you out there. It's a huge honor, and thank you so much for your interest. And there's one last thing for me to do. Tell you Merry Christmas. Over and out.
Thank you, Lev.